Business Focus with Kudzie, Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.
There's a lot that's happening in the world of business, and we discuss that right here on Capi Talk 100.4 FM, Harare's Heartbeat. Business Focus every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and today, Friday.
So inezo ndaitera pemsek vachitaura kuti hapana vari kuti vari kunyeberwa ngavauye
vari kuti vari kuti hatisi kuwana forex
vacho.
Some of them are lying kuti hatisi kutoiwana, and yet they are actually on the list yevakatowanawo big recently. All right, so there's also some of those things that do happen in the world of business, but it's time for us to get into business focus for today. Kudzie is not with us right here today, but we are going to do the program, and we are going to be speaking to the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce CEO, Mr. Chris Mugaga, to be with us right here on the show on Business Focus. Good morning to you, Mr. Mugaga, and welcome to the Business Focus on Capi Talk.
A great morning to you, Tim. How are you doing? Every time when I'm home, I was listening to your super station. I'm doing a stellar job. Well done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mugaga. We truly appreciate it. All right, based on the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce submissions to the RBZ ahead of the mid-term monetary policy statement, Mr. Mugaga, how would you rate the overall state of Zimbabwean economy and, of course, its business environment based on the submissions that you did?
Thank you so much, Tinashe. I think as Chamber of Commerce, we always try by all means to make sure we give what we consider to be an honest assessment of how the economy is performing. But if you were to ask, like you just did, about the state of the economy, obviously, we can certainly say it's a case of mixed fortunes. What we certainly want to avoid is to continue kicking the can down the road. What do I mean by that? I think you agree for quite some time now, exchange rate had been a stubborn headache for Zimbabwean economy, possibly since post-2008. Yes, it appeared like, as well, when we dollarized 2009 to 2018, but post-2018 again, when we attempted to have our local currency, the same challenge is having. So our engagement with the central bank, as we just asked, the focus is on exchange rate determination. The focus is on making sure that the pricing of the exchange rate reflects the dynamics of fundamentals in the economy. I don't think business has appetite to get forex at discounted rate. What we want is a stable rate, which will make business planning much easier. So overall, if you ask me what were issues of engagement with the central bank, the major focus was on exchange rate.
Mm-hmm. So how then do you view the RBZ's approach to monetary policy, particularly in terms of managing money supply expansion?
Yeah, regarding money supply, I think I can safely tell you that our engagement with the central bank governor just a few days ago, we obviously raised concern, but from the look of things, numbers are telling that there's not been quite much expansion on the monetary supply. But it's not necessarily on the money supply, rather. We also have to look at the liquidity side, because if you look at the local unit which had just been introduced, Zimbabwe Gold, you will see every time, for example, the contractors, this is an immediate example I'll throw to you. Every time contractors are paid for infrastructure development, they make a beeline to go to the market to try to swap their local unit for the US dollar. And that superficial demand being created, it to a certain extent also had an impact on the exchange rate. So when you talk of exchange rate determination, we've gone beyond just looking at the demand supply, but looking at the liquidity. Because once confidence is in short supply in the market, that ability or capacity to hold on to a local currency has not been quite very stellar or good, can I call that.
So as ZNCC, what's your stance on the market-determined exchange rate system? Do you believe it is currently functioning effectively in the country?
Obviously, I think it will need fine-tuning. We certainly can't just rest on our laurels, look at the sun and say, because this is what is happening, it's perfect. If we were to ask us, Chamber of Commerce, obviously, we feel like there's still quite a lot of work to do. Firstly, what we need to work on, there's been a talk of the reserves. Remember where we are saying we've got reserves supporting our local unit. The Chamber of Commerce, our position is clear to say at this juncture, it's quite tricky to continue referring to gold reserves as a way of market or exchange rate determination. Rather, let's work with the willing buyer, willing seller. The challenge of maybe telling the market that our currency is backed by gold. Once you can't go to any place, a bank, and convert at which is converted in gold, it becomes a problem. So converted or fungibility of that currency. It's an issue on its own, and we believe central bank should focus on willing buyer, willing seller. And at the moment, if you look, one goes into a bank, you want to meet your dealer or anyone to get forex. You can't have that much freedom possibly to argue or to bid, to say, look, I'm putting it at 19, consider do you have it? We don't have that. There is always a constant reference to an existing exchange rate, which means then the exchange rate itself somehow to a certain extent is not as super or as market representative as it should be, I would say.
16 minutes before 8 is our time. This is Business Focus. In case you've just joined us, we are speaking to Mr. Chris Mugaga, who is the ZNCC CEO right here on Business Focus. Mr. Mugaga, how important is it for Zimbabwe to build and maintain sufficient foreign exchange reserves? And of course, what strategies should the RBZ adopt to achieve this?
Thank you so much, Dinesh. I think for you to maintain that respectable quantum or reserve of a quantity of reserves, rather, you certainly need market confidence. You need that exchange rate I continue referring to. Because once exchange rate is a problem, even those who are expected to surrender their forex, either exporters or anyone, they will have a challenge. So time and again, we'll continue seeing possibly the central government is the reliable source of forex to the market, which should never be the case. We should be able to walk into our banks, Tinashe, and get the forex we need whenever we want to transact or do anything or buy anything. This constant reference, like we used to have of auction, it should somehow be nipped in the bud and buried for good. So we need that. Another thing, I think what is more important also in building forex reserve, we need that level of discipline. We've set up the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which then moved into Mutapa Fund. I think what is more important is to have a conversation to say, is this Mutapa Fund going to have a vision of accumulating reserves as was initially the case with the Sovereign Wealth Fund? Because right now, if you look at the institutional dynamic of Mutapa Fund, we are yet to learn more on how it expects to possibly mobilize reserves outside, trying maybe to keep those non-performing or not performing state-owned enterprises. It's an issue. Then lastly, I think you need that policy certainty. Once policy certainty is guaranteed, it's easy for you also to push for those reserves. But your other question was, why is it important? I think you know the El Nino-induced climate change. Right now, more than 8 million Zimbabweans are vulnerable to food shortages. Here and there, yes, we are getting food aid. But what is more important is to have that, in Shona they call it Dura, the reserves. At the moment, if you look at the import cover, what we can cover, possibly you'll see we can't go beyond even 2 weeks, which is not ideal even by international standards. It's an issue. We are looking at it, and as private sector, we believe we should work with government to achieve what we think should be the case.
Mr. Mugaga, let's look at the issue to do with business environment, of course, the confidence that, talking about confidence building, what specific measures do you think the central bank should take to build confidence in the Zimbabwean dollar and, of course, the overall economy at large?
Maybe this task I'll certainly try to decouple it only from the central bank. The role of the central bank, obviously, is to see to it that there's price stability, which is having low inflation, and they have to do it. And the only way for them to achieve it, obviously, is to reduce money supply to avoid printing money. Then, secondly, the Reserve Bank also has to see that there's exchange rate stability, which we continue talking about, as I just said now. Once exchange rate stability is compromised, business environment is toxic. But the whole discussion on business environment certainly cannot be foisted or limited to the central bank, because remember, it's an agent of the central government. We still have Minister of Finance and the Chamber of Commerce. Our fight has always been on a tax environment which is harsh, a tax environment which does not incentivize business, a tax environment which has been promoting revenue generation at the expense of equalizing resources, or somehow creating a business environment which will promote economic growth.
And obviously, when we look at the production and manufacturing of goods in Zimbabwe, there's a need for forex for the manufacturers. Our businesses are facing significant challenges in accessing a foreign currency for imports.
To a certain extent, just before we ended the program, obviously, I heard you referring to the Permanent Secretary, Mkoma George Gomatanga, the issue of funds or monies which are sitting on our accounts as manufacturers or businesses in general in the economy. I think what is more important, if you are to have a normal banking system, You don't tell someone, don't come to borrow because I've seen your money or you've got money in the bank. Actually, the credit system, how banks make money through credit expansion, the most reliable source of revenue for banks or profitability should be that interest income. But the moment you start stifling and saying no banks because we've seen a client who has got money, it's as good as seeing a client who has got a healthy. If Tinashe Chikuse has got a healthy bank balance and you say you can't apply for a mortgage because we have got cash, it's because we have trained ourselves to believe in a cash economy, and the results have been quite very disastrous for this economy. So yes, we've not been able to access forex easily, and the only way we have to access forex is not to build a culture where we queue every time to the bank or a central bank to have forex. My bank should be able to have confidence also in an exchange rate and say, Mr. Chikuse, we know you want $20,000 but we can only offer it at 22.5 as an exchange rate. Not a case where you go then to a bank and say, bank, issue a loan to Chikuse, but at 18 point or 14 because that's the exchange rate. Once you do that, you're stifling credit expansion, the whole multiplier effects of lending money to businesses. It would then translate itself in even reduce the economic activity because investment banking is somehow subdued.
Vamgaga mataura imukati, yes, we are facing some challenges in accessing forex. My challenges actually ndeapi.
Yeah, like I rightly said, when the exchange rate is not right and you want to go to a bank and you want to access forex, the bank will tell you, obviously we can't. Sometimes they will not tell you we don't agree with the exchange rate. There's no way you have a debate with a banker and they will tell you, no, you can't access it because the exchange rate is not proper. But from the macroeconomic scheme of things, when you then sit on the dashboard and say, what could be the reason why credit expansion to private sector is limited, then you can deduce and conclude to say, possibly it's the price of that money I'm looking for. Then also the liquidity of ZIG. Tinashe, if you were to make rounds to most parts of the country, in particular rural areas, ZIG is like gold. It doesn't exist. Most people, you go to talk or you go to Mashingo, you go wherever, you try to talk to an old lady who is living there about ZIG. What they know is the US dollar, nothing else. They are worried about that. So the whole current framework and structure in this economy, it is yet also to need fine-tuning. Because once we are talking about accessing the credit lines for private sector, it's just a smaller economy. Remember, almost 70% of the economy right now is commercial. So what we are clamoring for is not the 10 companies who are looking for forex. We are clamoring for that equalization, where on average, every organization or every household can walk to a bank and get forex. So yes, we couldn't get that forex because it's coming at a discount, and we still feel that the exchange rate is somehow overvalued. To the extent that whoever is to lend, they can actually just compensate that lending by maybe having used various exchange rates. To compensate for an exchange rate which is not held.
You spoke about equalization. How then can the RBZ ensure transparency and efficiency in the processes for businesses to access foreign currency?
I don't want Reserve Bank possibly to have a say in access of forex. The moment in a nation where they need a central bank to have a say on access of foreign currency, that's an anomaly. It's actual abnormality. It's not something expected in a normal economy for a central bank to push for that. Banks in their everyday work, when they sit on their desk, the treasurers, the dealers and all, they are the ones who should look for opportunities to say which business or which household is interested in having a credit line, a facility. Without the central bank's job is easy. Macroeconomic stability through exchange rate and inflation management. That's all. Anything else, central bank should never get into that. You remember, from the time of the predecessor of the current central bank governor, then JP Manguja, we always argued and said, don't make a central bank a conduit for allocation of money or forex. That is not the role of a central bank. Once you start expecting money or queues to go to central bank to access forex, then you should know we are on hot soup. Things are not well.
So, Mr. Mgaga Kudzie, Sharara has just joined me with a couple of burning questions he has got, and he said, no, and I'm on the show. And he's here. He's got a couple of questions for you.
Good morning, Mr. Mgaga. How are you?
It's always a pleasure. Kudzie, greetings. How are you?
Good. Maybe to start off, as ZNCC, my first question is to say,
whom does the ZNCC represent? When we hear you speaking as the CEO of ZNCC, whom exactly are you representing, so that we can, at least we can have a background of what ZNCC stands for?
Perfect question. So, Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, besides being the oldest association with a history which dates back to 1894, we represent literally almost every business in the country. In other words, you look at retailers, all your pick and pays, you look at your spas, big shops, which maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the names. Then you look at also banks. Interestingly, almost every bank in the country, except possibly one or two banks, are members of the Chamber of Commerce. Tertiary institutions, manufacturers, possibly your biggest manufacturers in the country, they are all members of the Chamber. You look at also the small-scale industry. So our representation is far and wide. We literally represent everyone.
Yes. So the next question is now, when you engage the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, are they listening to you? Do they take in your recommendations? Like in this case, you have put down your submissions that you have taken to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Do they listen to you, or you're just they don't listen to you?
No, to a certain extent, Kudzie, I believe they do. We are, as Chamber of Commerce, obviously, we are not naive to think that when we call for a submission, it will be taken in its entirety. But why is it that? Obviously, because when government speaks, they want to balance between the interests of business, those of a common man in the street, those of labor. So to a certain extent, obviously, they will not necessarily pick everything they say, but in terms of listening, I can confirm they do, not only the central bank. I could have also given you just an example of Chamber of Commerce position on what was called IDC, not Industrial Development Corporation. For years, Chamber of Commerce has been pushing to say, let's make it a finance institution which will support industry. And as I speak to you today, I know government has listened and it has become that which we have been pushing for. So they listen, but sometimes we don't agree, and in not agreeing, they refine us where I can definitely say.
So, Mr. Mgaga, how then can the ZNCC and the RBZ strengthen their collaboration to address the challenges facing the business community here in Zim?
The best way to do it, Tinashe, is easy. I think our engagement, if you were to look at our paper as Chamber of Commerce, we have clamored, we continue to clamor for an exchange rate. In fact, we believe if you fix the exchange rate, 75+% of challenges this economy is facing, they are going to be wished away. An exchange rate is the major price in an economy, because we are saying before I trade with you, or before an investor comes, either it's a FGI or a portfolio investment on the market, equity, the FX could maybe be somehow isolated because of its US dollar exposure, but the ZSE in particular, for example. Any moment you want an investor, the first thing they want to know, especially for Zimbabwe, given the ledger, the history of current problems, is the exchange rate, because it's the measure of the reward to an investor. So as ZNCC, we are not really wasting much time trying to touch on everything. One of the issues we are focusing on is to make sure that Zimbabwe is a reflective exchange rate, which will attract not only foreign investors, but also domestic investors to invest in this country. Because as I speak to you at the moment, the exchange rate itself will feel like it has not been at its best. As business, we are beneficiaries sometimes of forex. So if we're not patriotic enough naturally, we'll be celebrating an overvalued exchange rate because we'll get forex at discount, isn't it? But we want sustainable growth of the economy, so we are looking at it broadly.
We've got about 2 minutes to go, Mr. Mgaga. There's a listener who's coming in with their contribution. He says that the majority of our people does not need Forex. Forex is for foreign transactions. Exchange rate does not generate Forex. If Forex is in short supply, increasing the rate won't increase the quantities. What's your take on that?
I'm not sure if I was closer to the listener, I would have got it, but the exchange rate remains everything. Why business in Zimbabwe needs Forex, is because if you look at the import dependence of this economy, it's almost 0.7. In other words, for every dollar sitting in Zimbabwe, 70 cents is allocated to importing something. So the demand for Forex in the short to medium term in this economy, you can't really bracket it. It's so usurious, it's high. So yes, they need it. But as time goes on, that's when you can talk of production, which will lead to substitution of imports. Then you will graduate from needing imports. But as I speak to you right now, unfortunately, let me be clear to say the demand, the need for Forex in business is something we can't underestimate. We need Forex.
Thank you, Mr. Mgaga. And then maybe lastly, there's this issue of the Pan-African payment system that has been developed, I think, among others, the Afrexim Bank. How do you view the potential of the Pan-African payment system and settlement system for Zimbabwe? What steps should be taken to ensure the successful integration of the Zimbabwean dollar in this system? Maybe briefly can also just describe what the Pan-African payment system is all about, but briefly.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, before you talk of even what is posed by African Bank, it always existed through the COMESA, Chamber of Commerce being a member or a board member of COMESA, where the platform where we are saying all countries within Africa or in COMESA, they can actually transact using that platform where you want to trade with any of the country, in particular using products we call trade finance. The platform should be available for every country. But then in terms of issues,
all right, let me come in between Mr. Mgaga. Unfortunately, our time is up. We'll keep holding on to that question for another day and we discuss. But all the same, thank you so much for joining us right here on Business Focus. We appreciate it.